Tonight, under the silver glow of the moon, we travel to a faraway kingdom where a wise king has 3 brave daughters. Hidden secrets stir beneath an ancient oak tree, and whispers of magic float through the air. Are you ready to listen closely, to feel the wonder and the mystery, and discover the promise that only true hearts can unlock? Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let the story begin. Long before the noise of the modern world, when nights were lit only by the soft glow of oil lamps, and the moon was the only guardian of sleeping villages, there stood a kingdom tucked between wide golden fields and silver rivers. It was not the largest kingdom, nor the richest, but it was known everywhere for one thing that even travelers spoke about in faraway markets: the kindness of its king. King Heron was a man whose eyes held both strength and sorrow. He was not old, but life had touched him early. His queen, the gentle Lady Samira, had passed away when their youngest daughter was still learning her first words. It happened in winter, a winter colder than any remembered before, the kind that freezes the earth and snatches the breath of those unprepared. Samira's loss left a hollow in the castle hall's rooms felt too large, the nights too quiet, and the king's heart seemed to carry a weight he never spoke of. Yet he rose every morning, not for the crown, not for the duties of the throne, but for the 3 daughters who were the last pieces of Samira he still held. His eldest daughter, Liana, was 17, tall, graceful, and thoughtful. She carried her mother's calm spirit. Her voice soothed the sick. Her words comforted the troubled, and she had a way of placing her hand on a person's shoulder that made them feel seen, understood, and safe. His second daughter, Meher, was 15, expressive, fiery, and full of ideas that burst out of her like sunlight through storm clouds. She laughed easily, cried easily, loved deeply, and fought fiercely. Every corner of the castle echoed with the sound of her emotions. She was the warmth of the family. The youngest, little Rania, barely 10, was the spark of the palace. Her cheeks were always round with laughter, her hands always busy touching something she wasn't supposed. 2 flowers, bells, cats, even the edge of the king's cloak. Her voice bubbled like a stream hopping over pebbles, but inside her little chest, she carried the most delicate heart of all. The king loved each daughter not equally, but uniquely, the way one loves the sunrise differently from the sunset, not one better, not one lesser, just different. Every evening, when the day's duties ended and the kingdom quieted, Heron walked to the small room beside the library, a room lined with cushions, the scent of sandalwood drifting from old carved boxes. That room had belonged to Samira. She used to sit there with her daughters and tell them stories, brushing their hair as she spoke of kings, queens, and ordinary people whose courage shaped the world. And so Heron made a promise. He would keep that room alive. He could not bring Samira back, but he could keep her memory blooming like jasmine in spring. One night, as rain tapped gently on the castle windows, the 3 girls slipped into the story room. Liana brought her embroidery, Meher carried a basket of figs, and Rania hopped in without anything at all, her hands free because she knew she would soon be climbing into their father's lap. The king entered moments later, the fire crackling, casting orange light across the room. Rania ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You're late, Baba," she complained. "I had a meeting with the council," he answered. "You always have a meeting," Meher teased, popping a fig into her mouth. "And you always steal the last fig from the basket," the king replied, raising an eyebrow. Meher froze. "There were only 3 left when I came, and now there are none," Liana added softly. The king chuckled, and for a moment, the heaviness inside him faded. He sat down beside the fire, and his daughters gathered around him. The warmth of the fire mixed with the warmth in his heart on nights like these. He felt Samira's presence lingering in the room like a soft breath against his cheek. "Shall we tell a story?" he asked. "Yes," Rania squealed, climbing into his lap. "A new one, Baba. Not the one about the girl who befriends a dragon." Meher tells that one too loudly. "I do not," Mahar protested, but Liana just smiled. The king smoothed Ranya's hair and began. But that night, instead of a tale of magic, he told a story that had long lived in his heart, buried beneath responsibilities and grief. "It begins," he said slowly, his voice deep and steady. On the day you three were born. Liana looked up from her embroidery. Meher sat straighter. Renya curled closer. You may not remember her voice, Heron continued, but your mother had a way of speaking that made everything in the world feel gentle. When Liana was placed in her arms, she whispered, "This one will be the light of wisdom." And when Meher was born, she said, "This one carries the fire of courage." And when little Ranya arrived, so tiny and wrapped like a petal, she said, "This one will be the song of the family." Renya pressed her cheek to his chest. "What does that mean?" "It means," the king said, his eyes softening, "that each of you carries something special inside you. A kind of magic, not the kind in stories, but the kind that changes lives." Meher tilted her head. "But what does that have to do with the story?" "Everything," the king said. His tone shifted, careful, serious. "Because there is a prophecy." Liana's hands stilled. Meher leaned closer. "Dania vrinkto vasto. Your mother told me something before she died. Something she said would one day come true. She said the kingdom would face a moment of great sorrow, not sorrow of war, nor hunger, nor disease, but something deeper. Something inside our home." A chill crept into the room. The fire crackled louder. "She said," the king continued, "that one day I would have to choose between protecting the kingdom and protecting one of my daughters." Silence fell so heavy that even the wind outside seemed to pause. Ronya's fingers clutched his sleeve. "But you would choose..." The king closed his eyes for a moment. "I would always choose you. Always. But that is what scares me." Meher swallowed, her usual boldness dimming. "Why would we need protection? From what?" The king hesitated. He had not meant to tell the prophecy that night, not yet. But something inside him whispered that time was shifting. That fate was breathing against the palace walls. He looked at their faces, Liana's steady calm, Mahor's fierce fire, Ranya's trembling. Innocent Sand, he felt a tug. The same tug he felt on the day Samira died. "Protect them, no matter what. There is something happening in the kingdom," he said quietly. "Something that worries me. People in the outer villages have been reporting strange events, disappearances of shadows where no shadows should be, and rumors of a figure dressed in black visiting houses at night." Liana frowned. "Papa, rumors can be dangerous." "People talk when they are afraid." "I know," he replied. "But these fears, they feel familiar. Your mother once spoke of a man who would rise when the kingdom's heart was weakest." "Is the kingdom weak?" Meher asked. "No," the king said, "but I am." Those words settled like dust across the room. "You're not weak," Liana said gently. "You're the strongest person we know." But the king only shook his head. "Strength of sword is nothing when the heart trembles." The girls exchanged looks, fearful, uncertain. For the first time, they saw not their invincible father, but a man carrying a wound that had never healed. Ranya whispered, "Are we in danger?" "Not yet," Heron said softly, "but something tells me the world we know is changing. I need you three to stay close. Stay careful. And if anything ever feels wrong, anything, you must tell me." They nodded, though their hearts were uneasy. The king pulled all three daughters into his arms, holding them as if he could shield them from all the shadows in the world. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky like a warning. But inside, something deeper was shifting, a thread invisible, stretching between fate and fear. And somewhere far beyond the palace walls, a figure cloaked in black walked through the rain, carrying a list of names written in trembling ink. One of those names belonged to a daughter of King Haa Run, the first name. Asterisk, the morning after the storm. The palace woke to a sky washed clean, pale, and quiet like a sheet of silk. Birds flitted between the courtyard arches, shaking droplets from their wings. The scent of wet earth drifted through open windows, and the servants whispered their usual morning greetings as they carried baskets of laundry and jugs of warm milk across the halls. But despite the calm outside, something inside the palace felt different and unease, subtle as the shadow of a passing cloud. King Heron had barely slept. His mind had been caught between Samira's prophecy and the memory of his daughter's questioning eyes. All night he had listened to the rhythm of the rain, each drop echoing his fears. When dawn finally came, he rose with a heaviness in his chest, yet he pushed it aside. He could not let the girls sense his worry too deeply, not when he was their only anchor. Liana woke first, as she always did. She lived with a quiet discipline, rising before the sun, brushing her long dark hair, lighting a small candle in the window as she whispered a morning prayer for peace. She stepped into the corridor, feeling the chill of the stone floor beneath her bare feet. When she reached the courtyard, she found her father standing alone under the old fig tree. Its branches stretched wide, offering a shade that had sheltered the queen long ago when she would sit there reading to the girls. Heron looked up as Liana approached. "You're awake early," she said softly. "So are you," she smiled faintly. "You forget I'm always awake early." He nodded, then looked toward the horizon. Liana followed his gaze, noticing the distant line where the river shimmered, but she could feel his thoughts were elsewhere. "You didn't sleep," she said gently. He didn't deny it. "I'm thinking too much." "You're afraid," she said, her voice small but steady. He exhaled. "Yes." Liana stepped closer. She wasn't like Mahar or Runyashi, rarely clung to him physically. But today she reached for his hand. "You don't have to hide from us," she whispered. "We are not children, Baba. We know when something is wrong." "I know," he said, squeezing her hand. "That's what frightens me." Before Liana could respond, footsteps approached from behind. Meher burst into the courtyard, hair still tangled from sleep, half a slice of sweet bread in her hand. "Baba? Liana, you're both up! You could have woken me. Something is happening." "What happened?" the king asked sharply. Meher held up a folded parchment. A messenger arrived at the south gate. "He brought this," he said. It was urgent. Heron snatched the parchment faster than either girl expected. He broke the wax seal hurriedly and scanned the message, his brows tightening. "What is it?" Liana asked. He lowered the paper, his face paler than before. "Another disappearance." Mahor's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Where?" "A village near the marshlands. A young woman, taken at night. No traces, no noise, nothing left behind." Liana felt her stomach drop. "That's the third case this month." "Fourth," Heron corrected quietly. "Why are they taking people?" Meher asked, voice trembling despite her attempt to sound firm. "That is what I fear," Heron said. "I don't know." Before they could question him further, tiny footsteps pattered behind them. Ranga appeared, rubbing her eyes with a sleeve that was much too long for her. "Why is everyone awake?" "You all left me alone." Meher forced a smile. "Little bird, you were snoring so loudly. I thought the castle walls would collapse." "I do not snore," Ranya protested, voice squeaky. But Liana wasn't smiling. She bent down and touched Ranya's shoulder. "Come here." Ranya blinked, sensing the tension. "Baba, are you sad again?" The king knelt and held her gently. "I'm not sad. My heart. Just thinking about Mama," Ranya whispered. He paused, then nodded. "Yes. And about you." Meher swallowed. "Baba, are we safe?" His eyes lifted, meeting the eyes of all three daughters. "You are safe, as long as you are with me," he said firmly. "And I will do everything in my power to keep it that way." But his daughters heard the hidden worry beneath his words. The rest of the morning passed with uneasy quiet. The girls ate breakfast without their usual chatter. The king didn't join them. Instead, he locked himself in the war council chamber with his advisors, over maps and parchments. He tried to piece together meaning from scattered reports. Meanwhile, the daughters retreated to the inner garden place, filled with roses, jasmine, and a small pond where colorful fish swam lazily. Ranya sat beside the water, her fingers gently tapping the surface. "Do you think Baba is scared because of that man in black he talked about?" she asked. Meher sighed, plucking a rose and examining it. "He didn't say it was a man in black. He said it was someone who brings trouble when the kingdom is weak." "It's the same thing," Ranya said, voice thin. "Right?" Liana shook her head. "We don't know yet." "But we will," Meher said, determination flashing in her eyes. I won't sit here while Baba tries to protect the whole kingdom alone. We're not babies. Rania looked worried. But what can we do? Maybe nothing, Liana said softly. But we can stay alert. Watch. Listen. If something strange happens, we tell Baba immediately. Meher nodded fiercely. And we stay together. Always. Rania swallowed hard. Even when we sleep. Yes, Meher said. Especially then. Their conversation broke when a palace maid called from the doorway. Your Highnesses, the king wishes to see you. The girls exchanged looks and followed the maid to the council chamber.
Inside,
They found the king standing beside the large wooden table. Maps and scrolls lay scattered. But something else lay in the center, a small wooden box, old and carved with delicate designs. Heron looked up as they entered. I called you because there is something I need to give you, he said. The girls approached quietly. He opened the box. Inside were 3 objects: a small silver pendant, shaped like a teardrop, a golden hairpin set with a tiny ruby, and a slender bracelet woven from threads of pure black and white silk. These belong to your mother, Heron said softly. She wanted you each to have one when the time was right. Liana felt her breath hitch. Baba! These are her treasures! Yes, he said. And you will each receive one now. He lifted the silver teardrop. Liana? She stepped forward. The king placed it in her hand. This pendant is for wisdom. Your mother wore it the day she learned she was carrying you. She said the stone inside it listens to the heart. Keep it close. Liana's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I will, Bob. He picked up the golden hairpin. Meh. Meher stepped forward bravely, but her lips trembled. The king placed the hairpin in her palm. This was your mother's favorite. She wore it during festivals, the ruby catching the firelight. She said it reminded her that courage is not a flame that burns others, but one that warms those who are cold. Meher closed her fingers around it tightly. I'll protect it. Finally, he lifted the bracelet, delicate but strong. Rania. She stepped forward slowly. The king tied it around her tiny wrist. Your mother made this herself, he whispered. She said the black thread is for sorrow, the white for hope. Life gives you both. Together, they make you whole. Rania looked at the bracelet, then threw her arms around her father's neck. I miss Mama. He held her close, his voice breaking. I miss her too. For a long moment, they stood in a circle of silent grief, connected by memory and love. But the moment did not last. There was a knock. A guard entered, breathless. Your Majesty, news from the marshlands. They found a clue. The king straightened sharply. What kind of clue? A piece of fabric. Black fabric. Caught in the branches near the missing woman's window. The king's eyes hardened. Bring it here. The guard nodded and rushed out. Heron turned to his daughters. Their faces were pale. Girls, he said, voice steady but urgent. From today onward, you do not go anywhere alone. Not the gardens, not the library, not the halls. You stay together or with me. Ragna swallowed. Baba? Is the man in black real? He hesitated, and that hesitation answered her question. He may be, the king said finally, and I will find him. Before he finds us. Maha's hand tightened around her mother's hairpin. Let him come, she muttered. Let him try. But inside, her heart raced. That night, the castle grew still earlier than usual. Servants lit extra lamps in the halls. Guards patrolled in pairs, their boots echoing on stone floors. The moon rose slowly, bright but cold, casting long shadows across the palace walls. The 3 sisters slept in the same room, on 3 mattresses placed close together, the way they did when they were little. Rania slept in the middle, clutching Liana's hand in one of hers and Meher's in the other. Liana stayed awake longest, staring at the ceiling as thoughts twisted inside her mind like restless birds. Her mother's pendant rested against her heart, warm as though it carried a hidden heartbeat. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under. Silence settled over the room. Time passed. Hours. Then a soft, almost soundless creak. Someone pushed open the window. Shadow slipped inside. Tall, wrapped entirely in black. The cloth around his face left only his eyes visible, cold, sharp, unreadable. He stood in the darkness, watching the sleeping princesses. His gaze moved from Meher to Lianan, finally to the smallest one, Rania. He stepped closer to her bed. Her bracelet glimmered faintly in the moonlight. He reached out a gloved hand. And then Ranya's eyes opened. She stared into the darkness. Into him. She did not scream. She could not. Fear crushed her voice before it could rise. The shadow leaned closer. And whispered her name. Rania could not move. Her small body froze the way a deer freezes when it hears the snap of a twig in the forest. The room was dark, the only light spilling in from the moon, pale and trembling across the floor. The figure in black hovered above her, close enough that she could feel the coldness of his breath. If what he exhaled could even be called breath? Her heartbeat hammered, so loudly she was sure he could hear it. He whispered again her name, as if he had known it for years. Rania. The way he spoke it made her skin prickle. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't cruel. It was something else. Something like recognition, as if he were greeting something he had been waiting for. His gloved hand reached toward her wrist, the one wearing the black and white silk bracelet her mother had made. His fingers hovered over it, inches away. And then a floorboard creaked. The man froze. Ranya's eyes darted toward the source of the sound. Mehar rolled slightly in her sleep, murmuring something under her breath. The man's head snapped toward her like a wolf catching a scent. Ranya's throat finally loosened. A sound escaped her lips, not a scream. Not words, just a tiny, broken squeak of fear. It was enough. The man spun toward the window and leapt backward with a swiftness that didn't seem natural. His body moved like smoke, like shadow, slipping out before Mehar even opened her eyes. Rania sat up suddenly and gasped. Mehar, she cried, voice cracking. Liana! Both sisters jolted awake. Mehar's hand immediately shot under her pillow for the small wooden stick she kept there, not a weapon, but something she once said she'd use if needed. What? What happened? She demanded, eyes wide. Liana was already scanning the room with sharp, alert eyes. Rania! What is it? Someone was here! Rania stuttered, clutching her blanket. A man. In black. He touched the window. He said my name. Meher jumped to her feet. What? Liana grabbed Ranya's shoulders, voice firm but gentle. Rania! Listen! Are you sure you weren't dreaming? No! Rania cried, tears spilling over. I was awake. He was right here. Right here beside me. Her voice broke as she pointed to the empty space where the man had stood. Liana's face paled. Meher rushed to the window and looked outside. It's open, she said, voice shaking. It wasn't open before. I closed it myself. Liana's breath caught. Then she's not dreaming. Meher turned back, anger rising in her chest like fire. I knew something was coming. I knew it! But Rania wasn't thinking about danger anymore. She was sobbing now, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. Baba! Where is Baba? Liana didn't wait. She scooped Rania into her arms and said, We're going to him. They threw shawls over their nightclothes and rushed into the corridor. Guards stood at intervals, startled by the sudden movement. Mehar didn't slow down. Take us to the king, she shouted. The guards immediately followed, alarmed by the panic in the princesses' voices. The palace was silent, except for their quick footsteps echoing through the halls. They reached Heron's chamber, and Liana pounded on the door. Baba, please, open! The door swung open almost instantly. King Heron stood there half-dressed, face tight with fear from hearing their voices. What happened? Rania burst into tears again. Baba! He was in our room. Heron grabbed her shoulders. Who? The man in black, she sobbed. Thought the king's blood ran cold. He didn't ask if she was sure. He didn't ask for details. The moment he saw her trembling, he knew it was true. Guards, he shouted. Within seconds, the hallway filled with armored men. No one enters or leaves the princess's wing, he commanded. Search every corner of the castle, every window, every passage. Double the guards. Move now. The guards scattered. He pulled his daughters inside his chamber and shut the door. Only when it was closed did he kneel before them, voice shaking. Tell me exactly what you saw. Rania wiped her tears. He was tall, all in black. I couldn't see his face. Only his eyes. He opened the window without sound. And he knew my name. Haran's breath tightened. Meha stepped forward. We need to go after him, Baba. We need know. Haran said sharply. Meher. But no, he repeated. You are not confronting anyone. Not while I breathe. Liana touched her father's arm. Baba! Why? Rania! Why? Her! Haran looked down. His face cracked, revealing something deeper guilt. Fear. Memory! I was hoping this day would never come, he whispered. What day? Meha demanded. But before he could answer, another knock came at the door. A guard stepped inside. Your Majesty, we found something. Haran stood. Where? In the princess's room. The king turned to his daughters. Stay here. No, Meher said. We're coming, I said. We're coming, Liana repeated softly but firmly. He saw something in their faces. Fear mixed with courage, and he realized he could not protect them from everything by hiding truths. So he nodded. They walked together down the hallway. When they reached the room, several guards stood inside, lanterns raised. What did you find? Haran asked. A guard stepped aside. On the windowsill, caught on the sharp edge of the wood, was a strip of black cloth. The same texture as the one found in the marshlands. Meher clenched her fists. This is proof. Haran picked it up with shaking hands. Liana watched him closely. The king's eyes darkened not with anger, but with recognition. Baba, she whispered, you know something? Tell us. He didn't look at them at first. When he finally turned, his eyes were full of pain. It's him. Who? Meher asked. The man your mother warned me about. Silence. Even the guards stopped breathing. The one from the prophecy? Liana whispered. Yes, Rania hid behind Meher, heart pounding. Why does he want me? Haran's voice caught. Because you are the youngest. That doesn't make sense, Meher said, shaking her head. Why? The youngest! The king swallowed, each word heavy. Before your mother died? She told me that if the man in black ever returned, he would come for the smallest flame in the family. Smallest flame, Liana repeated. Your mother called you all flames, Haran said, looking at each daughter. Liana, the light of wisdom. Meher, the fire of courage. His voice soft, painfully. Rania was the smallest flame. The gentlest. The easiest to break. Meher wrapped her arms protectively around her sister. Rania whispered, trembling. But, why break me? Haran knelt and cupped her face. Because some shadows grow stronger when they steal light. And your light is soft, but powerful. Rania began to cry again. Haran pulled her into his arms. I will not let him touch you. You hear me? I will not let him near you again. But Liana heard what he didn't say. He found us tonight. He got into the castle. He reached my daughter. And we still don't know how. The guards searched the castle for hours. They found nothing, no footprints in the gardens, no torn cloth along the walls, no disturbed dust in the corridors. Whoever he was, he moved like a phantom. By dawn, the king gave new orders. The girls were moved to a secure chamber near the center of the palace, protected by guards at all entrances. Their rooms would now always be shared. The windows were reinforced. The night patrol doubled. But even with safety around them, the sisters found no peace. Rania wouldn't let go of her father's cloak. She held it as if it were the only thing keeping her anchored to the world. Meher hadn't slept again. She paced the room, frowning, planning, burning with helpless fury. Liana stayed quiet, but her eyes were sharper than ever, observing everything, remembering every detail. Later that afternoon, when the castle was calmer, the king returned to their room. "I must tell you something more," he said quietly. "About your mother." The girls leaned closer. "Years ago," Heron began, "before any of you were born, your mother encountered the man in black." They gasped. "He wasn't always a shadow. He was once a man with a face, a name, a life." But darkness touched his heart, twisted it. He wanted power, not power of kingdoms, but the power of hearts, the power of fear. He believed that breaking the purest soul would give him strength. Ragna flinched. "Me! You have your mother's soul," Heron whispered. "Soft, bright, healing. That is why he wants it." Maha's eyes burned with tears and rage. "Then he will have to kill me before he even touches her." Liana's voice was steady. "Baba, what do we do?" The king inhaled slowly. "We prepare." "How?" "Me demandato, by strengthening the one thing he cannot touch," Heron said. Their confusion deepened. "What is that?" Liana asked. Heron looked at all three daughters and said, "Your bond." The sisters exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean?" Meheher asked. "The prophecy was not only about danger," Heron continued. "It also said that the strength to defeat him lies in the unity of the sisters. Your mother believed that your hearts when joined are stronger than any shadow." Ragna blinked. "Stronger than him?" "Yes." Meher straightened. "So we stay together." Liana nodded. "Always." But while they spoke bravely, something stirred outside the palace walls. In the forest, beyond the villages, shadows moved through the trees, silent, patient, watching the castle from afar. The man in black stood among them, cloak billowing as he lifted a hand. On his fingers, a faint trace of silver shimmered. Ranya's moonlight reflected on him. He whispered her name again. Not in triumph, but in promise. Asterisk. The castle had finally gone quiet after a long day of celebration, laughter, and unexpected sadness. Princess Alara lay awake in her chamber that night, staring up at the beams of the ceiling carved with swirling flowers and stars by artisans from distant lands. A moonbeam shimmered through the tall window, touching her blanket like a gentle hand, but her heart was restless. She kept replaying the scene in the courtyard, how she had almost fallen, how the king had rushed toward her, shouting her name. His voice full of fear, he tried so hard to hide as a king, but could never hide as a father. That moment shook her. She suddenly felt the weight of her father's love, the worry aging his face, the lines forming near his eyes that she had never noticed before. And she wondered, what burdens is he carrying? What fears does he hide from us? These questions twisted inside her chest like threads of unease. As she turned again and again in her bed, she heard a soft knock at her door, so gentle she almost thought it was the wind. She sat up. "Elara," came a whisper, one she recognized instantly. Mira. Elara. Hurried to open the door. Mira slipped inside, hugging her arms around herself, still wearing her soft nightdress, her hair braided loosely over one shoulder. "You're awake too," Elara whispered. Mira gave a tiny nod. "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about father. He looked afraid today." She bit her lip. "I've never seen him like that." Elara gazed at her sister, noticing the worry in her eyes. Mira had always been the most sensitive of the three, the one who somehow felt the emotions hidden beneath the surface. The one who cried secretly whenever an injured bird was brought to the castle, or when she saw soldiers return from distant borders with tired eyes. Elara gently touched Mira's shoulders. "I was thinking the same thing." Before Elara could say more, they heard quick footsteps approaching down the hallway. A moment later, the door burst open only slightly, then fully. As Lyra stormed in, breathless, cheeks flushed as if she had run from her room. "Elara! Mira! You're awake, good." Lyra whispered loudly, then stopped, pressing her finger to her lips. I think father is hiding something." All three sisters exchanged looks. That same thought had been heavy on each of their hearts, like 3 candles lit from the same flame. Lyra closed the door and whispered again, "I just passed the royal library. Father is in there. At this hour, with old scrolls." He looked worried. Mira's eyes widened. Elara felt her heartbeat quicken. The king rarely entered the library at night. Those late hours he usually spent walking the courtyard or praying silently in the small chamber beneath the west tower. "Let's go," Elara said softly. Mira hesitated. "Should we disturb him?" "We won't. We'll just look. Father always tells us to trust our instincts." Elara took Mira's hand gently. "Something isn't right. If he is troubled, we should know." Lyra's chin lifted in her usual brave manner. "Exactly. Secrets never protect the family, they only create distance." So, quietly as shadows, the three princesses stepped into the dim hall, their slippers making the faintest whisper across the marble. The castle slept deeply, torches burned low, guards yawned at their posts. A soft wind whistled through the stones as though telling ancient stories only night could hear. They moved down a corridor, lined with portraits of kings long gone, their oil-painted eyes watching silently as the princesses passed. Elara felt something old and familiar in the silence, like the castle sensed their worry and shared it. When they reached the tall, arched entrance of the library, the faint golden light of a single lamp glowed beneath the door. The library was vast, filled with ancient manuscripts, scrolls tied with ribbons, books bound in leather, shelves reaching toward carved ceilings. The king's silhouette moved slow and heavy inside. Lyra leaned forward, ear against the door. "What is he doing?" Mira whispered. "Reading something." "Or searching," Lyra murmured. "Let's look from the window." Elara nodded. There was a narrow stained-glass window around the corner that opened into the library from above, a place they had often used as children to spy on storytellers and scholars during lessons. They slipped into the tiny hidden hallway and climbed the spiral steps quietly. When they reached the top, the three leaned cautiously toward the stained glass, pain blue and gold swirls casting shimmering colors onto their faces. Through the narrow gap where one glass panel had loosened years ago, they saw their father. The sight froze them. King Aldrin sat at the long oaken table, his shoulders slumped, his hands trembling slightly as he unrolled a weathered scroll. His crown was set aside beside a candle, and his face, usually strong, calm, steady, looked exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally. The kind of exhaustion carried in the heart, not in the body. He whispered, as though speaking to the scroll itself. "I have so little time left to tell them, but how can I burden my daughters? How can I place this weight upon their hearts?" The three princesses exchanged shocked, frightened glances. Time left. What did he mean? Mira's hand flew to her mouth, tears quickly filling her eyes. "Is he sick?" she whispered, voice trembling. Elara felt her own breath catch, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had to. For her sisters. They'd watched as the king pulled out a wooden box from the deep shelf behind him, a box carved with the shape of a rising sun. He opened it slowly, like someone opening their memories. Inside were letters, many letters sealed with wax. On each seal was the royal crest and the name of each daughter. 3 letters, each with a princess's name, carefully written. 1 for Elara, 1 for Mira, 1 for Lyra. The king whispered again, "If they ever discover the truth, these letters will guide them. They deserve to know why I've kept silent all these years." Elara felt her heart thundering. Mira silently began crying. Lyra's hands clenched into fists, anger mixed with fear. "What truth?" Lyra whispered fiercely. "What is he hiding from us?" Elara shook her head slowly. "We don't know. Not yet." They continued watching as the king took another deep breath. He rubbed his face with both hands, looking suddenly older than he ever had. "I pray they never have to read them," the king murmured. "But fate might decide otherwise." Then he carefully placed the letters back into the box, locked it, and slid it onto the highest shelf, one only reachable with a ladder. Elara swallowed thickly. It felt as though the ancient castle itself held its breath, as though the walls were witnessing something sacred and sorrowful. Mira whispered through her tears, "Why didn't he tell us?" "Why wouldn't he trust us?" Elara wrapped her arm around Mira, holding her tightly. "There must be a reason Father loves us more than his own life. Lyra wiped her eyes, quickly pretending she wasn't tearing up. Then we find out what he's hiding. Tomorrow! No, Elara whispered firmly. Not in anger. Not in fear. Her voice softened, trembling with emotion. We find out because we love him, and because whatever burden he carries, he shouldn't carry it alone. The three sisters looked back into the library one last time. The king sat unmoving, staring at the letters as though they were pieces of his heart sealed away. Silently, the princesses stepped back and left the hidden alcove. Down the stairs, through the shadowed corridor, back into the quiet night. But their steps were not the same as before. Something had changed. Something invisible yet heavy now tied them closer, not just as sisters, but as protectors of their father's heart. When they returned to Alera's room, none of them could sleep. They sat on her bed, wrapped in one blanket, leaning on one another, the old way they comforted themselves as children during storms. Mira's voice trembled as she asked, "Do you think something bad will happen?" Elara kissed Myra's forehead gently. "Not if we stand together." Lyra placed her hand over theirs. "Tomorrow, we talk to him. No matter what." Elara nodded slowly. Tonight, they had glimpsed a part of their father's soul they had never seen. And tomorrow, their journey one that would test their bond, their courage, and their love would truly begin. Dawn crept gently over the kingdom, spilling rosy light across the rooftops and brushing the castle walls with gold. Birds sang softly in the gardens, unaware of the heaviness pressing upon the hearts inside the palace. Princess Elara woke first. She hadn't truly slept, tonely drifted in and out of anxious thoughts. The image of her father hunched over that ancient scroll kept returning, carving worry into her chest. She whispered a silent prayer for strength, then rose quietly so she wouldn't disturb her sisters, who had fallen asleep tangled together like they used to as little girls. But Mira stirred anyway. She whispered, blinking sleepily. "Is it morning already?" Elara brushed her sister's hair gently. "Yes, little star. We should get ready." Mira nodded, then noticed Lyra still curled up near the pillow, clutching a blanket with her usual stubborn grip. Mira whispered gently, "Lyra, wake up." Lyra groaned. 5 more minutes. "Unless the castle is burning." "It is burning," Mira said softly. "Burning with worry." Lyra shot upright instantly. "Right. Father." She looked around, disoriented for a moment. "Is today the day we talk to him?" Elara inhaled deeply. "Yes, but not inside the castle. He needs peace. And truth deserves a quiet place." The sisters exchanged looks, soft, determined, frightened, but all with the same resolve blooming inside their hearts. They dressed simply today, leaving their formal gowns untouched. Soft dresses that moved like water, without jewels or embroidered threads. They wanted their father to see them not as princesses, but as daughters. Somewhere in the castle, a bell began to ring, marking early morning prayer time. Servants shuffled through corridors. Guards changed shifts. Cooks began preparing breakfast. But the sisters felt strangely separate from the usual rhythm, though today was not an ordinary day at all. When they reached the courtyard, the king was already there. He stood near the oldest tree of the palace, Grounds, massive oak that had been planted generations ago by the first queen. Its roots were thick and ancient, twisting deep into the soil, its branches wide like open arms offering shelter. The king often came here to think, or to remember, or to hide whatever storm lived inside him. His back was turned to them as he gazed at the sunrise, shoulders outlined by the soft morning glow. For a moment, the princesses simply watched him. He looked tall and strong, yet at the same time, painfully alone. Mira squeezed Elara's hand. Elara breathed in courage. Lyra stepped forward first, direct. As always, Father. King Aldrin turned, startled. His expression soft when he saw them, though there was a flicker of something else, something like worry quickly hidden. My daughters, you're awake early. Elara stepped closer. We wanted to walk with you. The king smiled, the corners of his eyes warming. Of course. Come. He gestured for them to sit beneath the old oak tree, where its roots formed natural seats. The sisters sat close together, hands touching, hearts beating fast. The king settled across from them, leaning against a sturdy root. For a long moment, no one spoke. Leaves rustled softly in the wind, and sunlight filtered through the branches, painting golden patches across the grass. Finally, Ilara spoke first. "Father, may I ask you something?" "You may ask me anything," the king replied gently. Ilara swallowed. Her voice trembled. "Are you hiding something from us?" Mira's breath caught. Lyra sat straighter, face tense. The king froze, not visibly, but enough for his stillness to reveal everything. "My brave girl," he whispered slowly. "Why would you ask such a thing?" Ilara looked down, twisting her fingers as she chose her words. "Yesterday, you seemed sad and scared. It hurt us to see that," Mira added softly. "We just want to help." The king's eyes flicked toward her, and the sadness in them deepened. Then he exhaled. A long, heavy, resigned exhale, like someone finally accepting something they had tried to avoid for too long. "My daughters," he said finally, "you are the greatest gift life has ever given me, and it is because I love you more than my own breath that I kept this secret." Lyra leaned forward. "What? Secret?" But before the king could answer, Mira whispered a question that made his eyes widen. "Are you sick?" The world seemed to pause. Even the wind quieted. Birds perched on nearby branches as if listening. The king closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something fragile glimmered in them. "No, Mira, I am not sick." The relief that washed through the princesses made their shoulders drop. But the king added quietly, "But there is something that may affect you. Something I hoped would never cross your paths." Ilara's voice was barely steady. "Please tell us." The king looked at each daughter, one by one, his gaze lingering, asked, if memorizing every detail of their faces. "The truth begins long before your births, long before even my own coronation. It is tied to our family, to a promise made generations ago. A promise that is now coming due." Lyra frowned. "A promise? What kind?" "A promise of protection," the king said softly. "And sacrifice." The sisters froze. The king continued, voice steady but thick with emotion. "This kingdom was not always peaceful. There was a time when darkness threatened to swallow our lands. A time when the river dried, the crops withered, and sickness spread. Our ancestors made a pact to save our people." Mira's fingers clutched her dress anxiously. "What kind of pact?" "A pact ensured by the birth of 3 daughters," the king said, looking at them meaningfully. 3 daughters of royal blood, each with a role to fulfill when the time came. The air around them grew still. Ilara's heartbeat stuttered. "Us?" "Yes," he whispered. Lyra shook her head. "That's impossible. We aren't magical. We aren't warriors. We're just, you are more than you know," the king said firmly. "Each of you carries something unique, something our ancestors foresaw." Ilara's voice trembled. "What does this promise require?" The king looked away briefly, pain pulling at his features. "It requires that one day, the 3 of you must make a choice. A choice that could protect our kingdom! Or doom it." Myra's eyes filled with tears. "But why didn't you tell us earlier?" "Because I wanted you to have a childhood free of fear," the king whispered. "Because I wanted you to laugh, play, and love your life before this burden ever touched you." Silence thickened around them, heavy and full of unspoken fear. Ilara reached for her father's hand. "We're not afraid of the truth, father. We're afraid of losing you. We're afraid of facing this without you." The king's eyes soft with pride. "You will never face anything alone. I am here now, and I will guide you. That is why I wrote those letters you must never read until the right time." Mira gasped softly. Lyra stiffened. Ilara's eyes widened. The king's gaze sharpened slightly. "You know about the letters?" The sisters exchanged a quick, guilty glance but said nothing. The king sighed, not with anger, but with understanding. "I suppose this was bound to happen." He reached out, pulling all 3 daughters into his arms. It wasn't a royal embrace. It wasn't formal. It wasn't distant. It was the embrace of a father who loved fiercely. The kind of hug that said, "You are my heart. All three of you." The kind of hug that felt like a promise, one not found in dusty scrolls or ancient rules, but in the simple truth of love. He whispered into their hair, "Whatever fate holds, we will walk toward it together." Mira wept quietly. Lyra clenched her jaw to hold back tears. Elara pressed her forehead to her father's shoulder, eyes closed, letting his warmth steady the storm inside her. When they finally released him, the king looked at them with a mix of sorrow and pride. "There is more you must know," he said softly, "but not here. Tonight, when the moon rises, meet me again under this tree. I will tell you everything." Elara nodded. Mira wiped her tears. Lyra tightened her fists with determination. All three felt the shift in the air, yet unmistakable. Today marked the beginning of something greater than any of them had imagined. And tonight, the truth would finally unfold. The day moved slowly, as though time itself sensed the heaviness resting on the royal family. After their morning beneath the oak tree, the three princesses went about their duties, but their minds remained tangled in the king's words. A promise, a pact, a choice that could save or doom the kingdom. But no details, no clear meaning. Only the weight of something vast and ancient pressing against their hearts. Elara tried to read in the library to distract herself, but each word blurred before her eyes. She kept seeing her father's tired smile, hearing the tremble hidden beneath his voice. Mira spent the afternoon in the palace garden, tending to the flowers as she usually did when troubled. Her touch soothed the petals, but not her thoughts. She kept pulling the same weeds again and again, lost in a loop of quiet worry. Lyra went to the training yard and took up a wooden staff, practicing until her arms trembled, until sweat stung her eyes, until her frustration found a place to escape. She hated feeling powerless. She hated not knowing what danger waited ahead. But more than anything, she hated seeing fear shadow her father's face. As the day drew on, the kingdom continued in its usual rhythm. Children played in the streets. Merchants called out prices in the market. Musicians practiced for the upcoming festival, but the castle felt different. The air was dense, expectant. It was as if the walls themselves held their breath. And when the sun sank into the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, each princess felt the same invisible pull, a silent reminder of the promise they had made that morning. They would go to him. Together, night fell slowly, wrapping the world in silver and blue. The moon rose high, round and glowing like a lantern of destiny. The old oak tree stood proudly in the courtyard, its leaves whispering in the gentle wind, as if ready to witness another chapter of the kingdom's secret. Elara arrived first. She had braided her hair softly and chosen a simple cloak, the color of deep dusk. She stood with her hands clasped, her breath rising in small clouds in the cold night air. Moments later, Mira approached, cloaked in pale lavender. Her steps were light, almost hesitant, as though the weight of tonight pressed against her heart more heavily than on the others. And then Lyra came, strong and sure, her cloak dark and flowing behind her like the shadow of a determined warrior. They stood side by side, beneath the ancient tree. Its branches towered above them, stretching wide like protective arms. Beneath the moonlight, its bark shimmered faintly, revealing marks carved over generations' names, prayers, promises! Footsteps echoed softly from the archway. The king walked toward them, his lantern casting warm light over his face. He looked more rested than earlier, but also solemn, like a man preparing to open doors that had been locked for too many years. "My daughters," he greeted, his voice smooth but heavy. "Thank you for coming." Elara stepped forward. "We're ready." "Father," he nodded, though the sadness behind his smile deepened. He placed the lantern on the ground and sat on one of the tree's thick roots. The princesses joined him, huddling close like when they were children, listening to stories of brave heroes in ancient lands, told in the same moonlit glow. But tonight's story was different. Tonight's story was theirs. The king looked up at the moon, gathering his thoughts before speaking. "There is something you must understand before I tell you the truth," he began. "Our family's strength has never come from magic or power, but from love, from unity, from the bond we share." Mira blinked back tears. Elara squeezed her hand gently. Lyra tensed. She knew that when a story began with love, it usually led to sacrifice. The king continued. "Many generations ago, our kingdom fell into a darkness no one could fight. Crops died. Rivers shrank. A strange shadow covered the land. People whispered of a curse, though no one knew its source." He paused. "But then, a prophecy was discovered written by an ancient seer. It spoke of a future when the kingdom would face the same shadow again, and it said that the only light strong enough to break the darkness would come from a king blessed with 3 daughters." At those words, all 3 princesses froze. The king nodded slowly. "Yes, the prophecy was about you." Mira's lip trembled. "But why us? We're not warriors or sorceresses." The king smiled sadly. "The prophecy never spoke of weapons or spells. It spoke of heart, of courage, of unity, of 3 souls bound together so strongly that even darkness feared their bond." Elara felt her breath catch. Lyra frowned. "What does that mean? What must we do?" The king hesitated. The night air grew colder around them. "There is a place beyond the borders of our kingdom," he said quietly. "A place called the Valley of Echoes. It is where the first queen of our bloodline made the ancient pact that saved our kingdom. And it is where the 3 of you must someday go." Elara flinched. "Go? Arong." "No," the king said gently. "Together. Always together." Mira leaned closer. "What will we find there?" The king closed his eyes for a moment. Pain flickered across his face. "You will find the truth of the pact, and the final choice the prophecy demands." Lyra's voice sharpened. "Is it dangerous?" "Yes," the king whispered. "Very." Myra's hand trembled in Elara's. "Will we survive it?" The king looked at her with such tenderness that Mira felt tears spill over. "The prophecy does not say what happens after the choice, but it does say that only the 3 of you have the power to save this kingdom from the coming shadow." Elara swallowed hard. "When will this shadow come?" The king's fingers tightened slightly on his cloak. "It has already begun," he said softly. Silence fell like snow. Elara's heart pounded. Mira's breath hitched. Lyra's eyes widened in shock. "What?" Lyra whispered. "How? Have you not felt the strange cold in the mornings?" the king asked. "Or seen the farmers worry about soil that won't soften? Or heard healers say that more people fall ill with no clear cause?" Elara remembered all these things. She had dismissed them before, but now they formed a chilling pattern. Mira covered her mouth. "The shadows on the hills. I thought it was a cloud." Lyra clenched her jaw. "So it's real. The danger is real." The king nodded grimly. "And it grows every day. That is why I wrote the letters for the moment when you must make the journey," Elara whispered. "But we don't want letters, Father. We want you. We want your guidance, your voice." He cupped her cheek with a trembling hand. "And I will give you all of that for as long as I can." Mira suddenly froze. Lyra stiffened. Elara's breath hitched. "As long as you can," Elara echoed. The king lowered his gaze. "The pact our ancestors made. It demands a price from the king as well." Lyra's voice cracked. "What price?" the king whispered, his voice barely carrying in the night air. "My time." The world around them stopped. Elara's hand flew to her mouth. Mira's eyes filled instantly with tears. Lyra shook her head violently. "No, no, no. That can't be true." The king reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. "I made my peace with this long ago," he said softly. "The pact granted the kingdom years of peace, but it also shortened the king's years of life." Elara felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Father." He pulled all 3 daughters into his arms, holding them close. "My time is not over yet," he whispered. "But it grows shorter, and when the shadow rises fully, I may not be here to protect you." Mira sobbed quietly. Lyra pressed her forehead to his shoulder, teeth clenched to hold back her cries. Elara trembled as she embraced him. "But listen to me," the king said, voice firm despite his pain. "You three are the hope of this kingdom, and I believe in you more than I believe in destiny itself. You were born with hearts strong enough to guide the future." He kissed the top of each daughter's head. "When the time comes, you will know what to do." The sisters clung to him tightly, their tears soaking into his cloak, 3 hearts breaking in the same rhythm. 3 souls bound by a love stronger than fear. The moon glowed brighter, as if lighting their path before they had even taken the first step. Tonight, the truth had been revealed, and nothing would ever be the same again. Asterisk. The castle felt different the next morning. Quieter, heavier, as though the truth spoken under the moonlight still hung in the air like a soft fog that refused to lift. Elara woke with the ache of last night still resting on her chest. Her pillow was still damp from tears she didn't remember shedding, and as she sat up slowly, she found Mira curled beside her again. Much like she had slept when they were children, seeking closeness whenever fear crept into her dreams. Lyra, too, sat by the window, knees drawn to her chest, her eyes redrimmed from a night without sleep. None of them had spoken since they had left the oak tree. Each daughter had carried her pain in silence, trying to understand, trying to breathe, trying to hold her heart together. Elara reached out and gently touched Mira's cheek. "How long have you been awake?" she whispered. Myra fluttered her eyes open. "I don't know. It still feels like night." Lyra turned her head. "That's because nothing feels real anymore." Elara rose from the bed and wrapped her arms around both of them. They sat like that for a moment, 3 sisters, 3 pieces of one soul, holding on to each other because the world felt uncertain. "We can get through this," Elara murmured, though her voice cracked slightly. "We will." Lyra's voice was low, rough. "I don't even know what this is, Elara. A prophecy, a pact, a shadow we can't see. And our father." Her voice broke. "Our father is running out of time." Mira's tears silently fell again. "I don't want to lose him." Elara tightened her embrace, wishing she could take all their hurt into herself. "We won't lose him today," she whispered. "We have this day." "We have him now," Mira nodded shakily. Lyra wiped her face harshly. "We need to be strong. He needs us to be strong." Elara looked at her youngest sister so fierce, yet so frightened beneath her boldness. "I know," Elara said softly, "but we are allowed to hurt too." Later that morning, they went to the great hall to find their father. To their surprise, he sat at the long table smiling not with joy perhaps, but with a warm softness that wrapped around the room like a comforting blanket. "Come," he said, rising to greet them. "Sit with me. Eat. Share this morning with me." And so they did. The breakfast table was filled with fresh breads, honey, fruit, cheese, warm milk, everything the king knew his daughters loved. It looked like a feast for a celebration. But the king's eyes, those eyes, told another story. He reached for Myra's hand first, brushing his thumb gently across her knuckles. "Did you sleep, little star?" Mira shook her head. "Not well." He cupped her cheek tenderly. "I feared that." Then he looked to Lyra, who was stiff and distant. "You look angry?" he said softly. Lyra stared at the table. "I don't want to be angry, but I am." He nodded. "Good. That means your heart is alive." Finally, his gaze fell on Elara, steady, quiet, hurting. "You carry everything inside you too deeply," he whispered. Elara's breath trembled. "I don't know how else to carry it." The king moved closer and wrapped his arms around all 3 of them right there at the breakfast table, pulling them close, kissing their hair, whispering, "My daughters, my beautiful girls. Listen carefully." He drew back slightly,
holding their hands.
"You do not need to be strong for me. Not today. Not now. Not ever. Your love is strength enough." Myra's tears flowed again. Lyra looked away to hide hers. Elara bit her lip to keep from breaking. The king lifted their chins one by one. "Look at me. he said gently. All three obeyed. I am still here, and I intend to stay as long as my heart allows. But I need you to live this day not in fear, not in sorrow, but in togetherness. The princesses listened quietly as he continued. Before I tell you the next part of the prophecy, or the pact, I want you to spend the day with me. No talk of destiny. No talk of danger. Just love. Just us. Will you give me that gift? The sisters exchanged looks. A whole day. A gift of time. Elara nodded first. Of course, father. Mira wiped her tears and whispered, I want that. Lyra hesitated, her jaw trembling, then finally nodded. For you? She said softly. The king's face melted with relief. Then come. Today we make memories that will carry you through any darkness. The day that followed was unlike any they had shared before. First, the king took them to the winter garden, a private place behind the castle where white roses bloomed even in cold seasons. He told them stories of their mother, the way she used to sing to the roses, how she had chosen the names of each daughter, how she had loved to dance barefoot in the morning dew. Mira held his arm the whole time, listening with shining eyes. Then they went to the stables, where Lyra's favorite mare was kept. The king helped Lyra ride again, laughing with her when she nearly lost her balance, reminding her she used to be fearless, even as a toddler. Lyra laughed torially, laughed for the first time since the previous night. Next, they walked to the riverbank, where Elara had once fallen into the water as a child. The king reminded her how she had cried, not from fear, but because a little fish had brushed against her foot and startled her. Elara laughed until she cried, and Mira laughed with her, and Lyra joined in too. It felt like they were children again, wrapped in their father's arms, protected by the sunlight, safe inside a world untouched by darkness or prophecy. They spent the afternoon listening to him recite poems their mother had loved, poems about courage and gentleness and the way love can defeat anything. As evening approached, they ate together on the terrace overlooking the valley. Warm soup, fresh bread, soft cheese, and the king told them stories of their ancestors, stories that were filled not with the weight of fate but with humor and tenderness. For a few precious hours, fear loosened its grip, worry faded like mist. The world shrank down to one thing: family. And then came the sunset. A breathtaking wash of orange and violet filled the sky, casting long shadows across the stone terrace. The king turned to his daughters, his face bathed in golden light. My loves, he whispered, thank you for today. I needed this more than you know. Mira hugged him tightly. Lyra placed her head on his shoulder. Elara took his hand and kissed it gently. He closed his eyes for a moment, as though memorizing the feeling of their closeness. Then he straightened. Tonight, he said quietly, I will tell you the rest. All three sisters froze. The warmth of the day suddenly felt fragile. The golden light trembled. The soft wind suddenly felt colder. Elara's voice broke. Father? Must it be tonight? Yes, he whispered. You have the right to know, and there is something you must see. Mira shook her head, voice trembling. I'm scared. He gathered her into his arms. I know, little star, but I am with you. Lyra gripped his sleeve. Whatever it is, we will face it. He kissed her forehead. I know you will. Then he looked at the three of them, his daughters, his heart, his legacy, and said softly, when the moon rises again, meet me under the old oak tree. Elara swallowed hard. Mira wiped her eyes. Lyra clenched her fists. They nodded. But as the king walked away toward his chamber, a wind swept through the courtyard. The lanterns flickered. The sky darkened quickly, too quickly. And somewhere far beyond the castle walls, a distant rumble echoed. A deep, low sound. Not thunder. Not a storm. Something else. Something awakening. The princesses looked at one another, the same fear flickering in all three pairs of eyes. Tonight, the truth would deepen, and the shadow would draw nearer. Night had settled softly over the palace, like a velvet blanket pulled gently across the world. The moon was full round, glowing, almost watching while the torches in the corridors flickered as if whispering old secrets to anyone who cared to listen. King Arav stood in his private balcony, both hands resting on the marble railing, staring out at the dark horizon. The wind carried the fragrance of jasmine, but tonight, even the sweetness felt heavy. He was worried as a father, not a king. His daughters had grown, not just in age but in courage, in responsibility, in fear, and in silent love. He could see it in their eyes. Something was changing, something big, something he could no longer protect them from simply by locking the palace gates. He had thought that sending them out separately would help them learn, grow, and mature, and it did. But now it seemed like each journey had opened a different door, some filled with light, some with shadows. Meher had returned from the forest with a calm strength, but also with a fear she had not yet spoken about. Rui had come back from the village quieter, carrying a strange glow in her eyes that wasn't joy. And little Noor's innocence was still there. But something had taken root in her, something like a gentle sadness that she herself did not understand. King Arav closed his eyes. "My daughters," he whispered to the night. "What weight have you brought back with you?" Inside the palace, the girls were in Meher's room. The room looked like a quiet dream, soft lamps, embroidered rugs, cushions scattered like colorful clouds. Meher sat cross-legged on her bed, brushing Nir's hair while Rui stood by the window, her forehead against the glass. Noor was unusually silent. She usually talked endlessly about everything from the color of clouds to how fast butterflies should fly. But tonight, she sat with her hands in her lap, staring down at nothing. Meher's voice was soft. "Noor, you're very quiet. What is it?" Noor took a breath, long and shaky. I don't know. Something feels strange." Rui turned from the window. "Strange how?" Noor blinked, and her lashes glistened. "When I was in the village, the old woman, I still see her in my dreams. Her face, her eyes, and she keeps telling me something." Her voice cracked. "She tells me I must remember." Meher's brush stopped. "Remember what?" "What?" Noor shook her head helplessly. "I don't know." Rui moved closer and kneeled beside her. "You don't have to be scared, Noor. We're here." "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Noor nodded, but the uneasiness in her small eyes remained. A moment later, the door creaked open. The king stepped inside. His daughters straightened instantly. He looked tired. Not in the way kings get tired from ruling, but in the way fathers get tired from worrying. He sat down beside Noor and stroked her hair. "What troubles my smallest star?" he asked gently. Noor didn't answer at first. She just leaned into him, like a child who had finally found the one place she didn't have to pretend to be brave. King Arav waited. He never rushed his daughters. Finally, Noor whispered, "Baba, I think something is coming. Something big. And I'm scared I won't understand it in time." The king felt his breath catch. "Did someone say something to you? Did someone frighten you?" Noor wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "No. It's just, I can hear things sometimes. Not voices. More like feelings. Something inside me knows something is going to happen." Rui and Meher exchanged a glance. They felt it, two different versions of the same worry. King Arav lifted Noor's chin gently. "You do not have to understand everything, my child. You only need to remember one thing: you are not alone." Noor nodded, but the king could see she was unconvinced. Something deeper was troubling her. Something she perhaps did not fully recognize. Later that night, after Noor had fallen asleep curled against May, the king called the other two daughters to the balcony. The moon glowed behind him as he spoke. "Tell me," the king said quietly, "what happened on your journeys?" "Something changed in each of you." Rui lowered her eyes. Meher exhaled slowly. Finally, Rui spoke first. "Baba, the people in the village need help. They are afraid. Something has been happening in the valley. The animals behave strangely. The nights are darker." "The elders whisper about a sign," Meher added. "The forest is changing too. Even the wind feels different." "The wise man I met," he said, "something is shifting. Something old. Something forgotten. The king's heart tightened. Why did none of you speak of this earlier? We didn't want to worry you, Rui said softly. The king let out a trembling breath, both sad and proud. I am your father. Your fears are mine to carry. Rui stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him tightly. Meher followed, pressing her forehead to his shoulder. The king closed his eyes, holding his two daughters close. For a moment, it was just a father and his children under the moonlight, not a king, not princesses, just a family trying to understand the world. The next morning, the palace woke slowly. Servants whispered in corridors. Birds fluttered around the gardens, and the smell of warm bread filled the air. But between all the ordinary, something felt unusual. Noor woke up pale. Baji, she whispered to Meher. I had the dream again. What dream? The old woman, she said. The forgotten truth will return. Meher's hand froze midair. What truth? Nur shook her head. She didn't say. When they met Rui in the hallway, she noticed Nur's expression immediately. Another dream. Nur nodded. Roohi placed a comforting arm around her shoulders. We'll tell Baba. After breakfast, the king gathered all three daughters in the royal library. The huge room was filled with ancient scrolls, books wrapped in leather, and maps older than the kingdom itself. He lit a small oil lamp and placed it on the table. The warm light danced across their faces. Listen carefully, the king said. There is something I never told you. Not because I wished to hide it from you, but because I hoped it would never come to pass. The daughters leaned in, hearts beating faster. Long before you were born, the king continued, our kingdom was protected by something sacred. Not a weapon. Notto magic. Something far older on. Ancient vow. Mahor's breath caught. Rui's fingers tightened around the table. Nora clung to her father's sleeve. The king continued, voice deep and steady. That vow kept us safe for generations. But the elders feared that one day the vow would weaken, and if it ever did, the kingdom would face a challenge, a trial one that only the king's daughters could resolve. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Meher spoke first. What kind of trial? The king looked at No. Then at Ruizing. May, I do not know, he whispered. Only that, when the time came, you three would feel it first. A quiet gasp escaped Nur's lips. Rui's heartbeat echoed in her ears. Meher's chest tightened with a strange, sudden clarity. The king continued, I prayed that day would never come. But now, I fear it is here. Nora trembled. Baba? What are we supposed to do? The king cupped her face gently. You do nothing alone. Remember that, whatever this challenge is, it is meant for the three of you. Together, Rui swallowed hard. But how do we begin? The king's eyes softened with both love and sorrow. You begin, he said, by remembering who you are, not princesses, not daughters of a king, but daughters of this land, daughters chosen for something greater. The oil lamp flickered sharply, though there was no wind. Nor shivered. Meher felt her stomach twist. Rui glanced toward the library window because, for a moment, she thought she saw something outside. A shadow, a movement, a sign. Something had awakened. And it was only the beginning. The wind had changed. It no longer carried the soft, comforting scent of jasmine or the gentle rustle of the palace gardens. Instead, it whispered sharply through the corridors, brushing cold against the stone walls and rattling windows as though warning of something unseen. The castle felt alive and tense. Every shadow stretched long and uneasy in the moonlight. Ilara woke first. Her heart had been racing all night. The dream she had seen a shadow stretching over the kingdom. Darkening forests, rivers, and villages clung to her mind like a heavy cloak. She bolted upright, her chest tight, and glanced around the room. Mira and Lyra were still asleep, curled in their usual spots, faces peaceful yet delicate under the silver glow of the moonlight spilling through the window. Larada's mind went immediately to the king. He had said the trial was near. The prophecy was awakening, and her blood sang with a mixture of fear and determination. She swallowed her worry and rose quietly, determined not to wake her sisters yet. Tonight, she would watch. She would wait. She would prepare. In the courtyard, the old oak tree stood like a sentinel, its branches scraping the sky, swaying in the strange wind. King Arav was already there, cloaked in shadows, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His lantern swung slightly in his hand, casting patches of light and darkness across the cold stone. "Ilara," he said softly when he saw her, "I knew you would rise first." She walked toward him, her feet silent on the stone path. "Father, the shadow. I felt it in my dream." He nodded gravely. "I feared as much. The wind carries it even tonight. It moves quickly." Ilara swallowed hard. "What should we do?" The king's eyes soft with sorrow. "We prepare, my daughter." "Not with swords, not with shields, but with our hearts and with each other. You three are the key. That is why the prophecy chose you." From within the castle, Mira and Lyra appeared, drawn by the silent call that seemed to flow from the oak tree. Mira's eyes were wide with fear, but she clutched her sister's hands tightly. Lyra's jaw was set. Her posture bristled with both determination and stubborn bravery. Father and daughters stood together beneath the ancient oak. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The only sound was the wind, growing sharper with each passing minute. Then the king spoke again, voice calm but filled with weight. "Listen carefully. The shadow is not merely darkness. It is the absence of balance, the breaking of a sacred vow long forgotten. It will test everything you are, every bond you have, every ounce of courage in your hearts." Ilara felt a chill run through her. "How will we know where to begin?" "You will feel it," the king said. "You will hear it. You will see it. And when the time comes, the letters I wrote will guide you. But only when you are ready to trust yourselves and each other." Mira's voice trembled. "But what if we fail?" King Arav cupped her face gently. "You will not fail. You will only learn together. That is the power of your bond. That is why you were chosen." Lyra took a deep breath, eyes fierce, despite the fear in them. "Then we start? Now. We wait, but we prepare. We face it together." The wind gusted suddenly, shaking the branches overhead. A shadow flickered across the courtyard wall, long, thin, and twisting. The girls gasped. Even King Arav stiffened, though he did not look away from the horizon. "It begins," he whispered. 4 hours. They stayed beneath the oak tree, silent and watchful, listening to the night, feeling the stirrings of the approaching darkness. Each girl felt it differently. Ilara, with a prickling in her mind. Mira with a cold sadness pressing on her chest, and Lyra with her fists clenched and teeth gritted, ready to act. The first sign appeared as a soft rustling in the distance, like hundreds of leaves moving at once, though the trees were still. Then came a faint whisper, almost human, almost sorrowful, weaving through the wind. "Return! Return!" The truth must awaken. Ilara's hands tightened around her sisters. Mira shivered. Lyra's lips pressed into a thin line. The king spoke, steadying them with his presence. "Do not fear what you hear. The shadow tests hearts, but it cannot break love. Not love, that is true. Not love, that is shared." A silence fell. The wind stilled for a single heartbeat, as though the world itself held its breath. Then, from the far edge of the courtyard, a faint glow appeared, flickering like a distant lantern. It moved closer, slow but purposeful. The sisters held each other tightly, staring wide-eyed. The shadow they had felt, the darkness that had whispered in their dreams, was coming closer. But there was also light. King Arav whispered, "Do not run. Do not fight. You must face it with your hearts together. This is your trial's beginning." The glow stopped near the roots of the old oak tree, and then, from within the light, a figure slowly emerged, a figure tall and shrouded, but not entirely human. Its presence carried both sorrow and power. The shadow had form. It had a will, and it was waiting. Ilara swallowed hard. Mira squeezed her hand. Lyra's fists unclenched slightly, tension coiling like a spring dot. King Arav's voice rang steady through the cold night. Remember who you are? Remember each other? Remember love. That is your strength. That is the light that will guide you through what comes next. The daughters nodded, hearts pounding. They had not yet spoken a word, yet their bond shone brighter than the approaching shadow, and as it moved closer, their fear began to mingle with courage, for they realized something essential. They were not alone. And in that realization, even the night seemed to pause. The trial had begun. The night was thick with silence and tension. The castle courtyard, usually a place of laughter and play, was now cloaked in shadows that twisted unnaturally around the old oak tree. The moon cast silver streaks through the branches, painting the stone ground with light and darkness, as though the very world itself were holding its breath. Mira and Lyra stood together beneath the oak, their hands clasped tightly. They could feel the shadow moving closer, coiling and twisting like smoke with a life of its own. Yet, as frightening as it was, a calm certainty had settled in their hearts. Whatever came, they would face it together. They had no choice but to trust each other and themselves. King Arav stood just behind them, his cloak catching the faint wind. His face was lined with worry. Yes, but also with quiet pride. He had taught them courage in his own way, through small acts of love, through patience, through the warmth of his presence. And now, that strength would be tested. The shadow loomed in front of them, a figure that shifted constantly. One moment, tall and thin, the next a swirling mass of darkness. From within its depths came a whisper, low and haunting. Who will claim the vow? Who will restore balance? Who bears the heart to choose? Mira's breath trembled. Father! What do we do? King Arav stepped forward, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. Do not fear. The shadow can only be defeated by the choice that comes from love, not fear. Trust each other. Trust yourselves. Ilara took a deep breath. Her mind cleared despite the fear. We are not alone, she whispered. We are together. That is our strength. The shadow paused, as if hearing her words. Its whispers grew louder, echoing in their ears. Choose, choose, choose. Lyra's fists clenched. I choose us. One choose my sisters. I choose family. Mira's voice, trembling but firm, echoed. I choose love. I choose hope. I choose to protect each other. Ilara stepped forward, raising her head to meet the shadow. And I choose togetherness. Nothing else matters.
The shadow wavered.
The darkness rippled like water, then began to shrink. It recoiled from their voices, from the unity of their hearts. Slowly, the twisting darkness condensed into a single, small form, like a black mist being drawn into itself. The courtyard lightened slightly. King Arav watched, eyes shining with unshed tears. You did it, he whispered. Your hearts, your love, it is stronger than the darkness. But the shadow spoke one final time, soft and sorrowful. A price must be paid. One heart must remain. To guard the balance, the daughters froze. Mira and Lyra looked at one another, the weight of the prophecy settling fully upon them. Father, Ilara said, voice trembling. Does it mean one of us? King Arav nodded slowly. The ancient pact demands sacrifice. But remember, sacrifice is not the end. It is part of the promise, part of protecting what is loved. The sisters huddled together, thinking fast but feeling deeply. Each of them had always been brave in different ways. Each had strength the other admired, and in that moment, their love for one another became crystal clear. Mira spoke first, tears shining in her eyes. I will stay. I will guard the balance. You two, live fully. Protect the kingdom. Protect? Father, Ilara shook her head fiercely. No, Mira. We are three. We are stronger together. If one is taken, it will never end. Lyra, usually so fierce, spoke softly, maybe the choice is not one of us alone. Maybe the sacrifice is not just fear, but letting the shadow know our hearts cannot be broken. Elara's eyes widened. You mean all three of us? Lyra nodded slowly. If we face it together, there is no shadow we cannot overcome. The king's eyes shimmered with pride. That is it, he said. Love does not demand the end. It demands unity, courage, and sacrifice of doubt. Together, the three sisters stepped forward. They joined hands, hearts beating in unison. They closed their eyes, thinking of their father, of the kingdom, and of the love that had carried them through every hardship. The shadow approached once more, looming, whispering, but when it touched the circle of their hands, it found not fear, but strength. Their love burned like sunlight through the darkest night. The darkness shrieked, unraveling like smoke caught in the wind, and then it vanished. The courtyard filled with a soft golden light. The wind calmed. The leaves of the oak tree shimmered as if applauding silently. A quiet peace settled over the kingdom, warm and gentle, carrying with it the relief of hearts reunited and a family's bond stronger than prophecy itself. King Arav knelt and embraced his daughters, tears sliding down his cheeks. You did it. All of you. Together, you have saved the kingdom, saved each other, and you have shown that love is the greatest power of all. Elara buried her face in his shoulder. Mira clung to them both. Lyra wrapped her arms around the family tightly, feeling the warmth, the safety, the love that had carried them through the darkest night. For a long time, none of them spoke. They simply held one another beneath the old oak tree, hearts beating together, feeling the magic of togetherness. Courage and love. The shadow was gone, but its lesson remained clear. Strength is not in one, but in all. Courage is not in might, but in heart and love. Love is what truly protects the world. As dawn approached, the first golden rays of sun touched the castle towers. Birds sang in celebration. The wind softened, and the kingdom awakened, untouched by darkness, guided by the love of three brave sisters and the unwavering heart of their father. And in that moment, King Arav knew that no prophecy, no shadow, and no trial could ever diminish the bond that would carry the kingdom and their hearts through every tomorrow. The end.